It's fatally flawed. Step 1. The voting system is the problem. People are up in arms about the state of the world right now, and the only thing we seem able to agree on is that we have a problem. The issues themselves are vitally important, but many of us are starting to realize that to fix any of it, we need to get to the root of it all. We need to be able to work together and make collective decisions that represent the will of the people. Election reform is a big field, and there are a number of ways that we could patch things up, but we're going to focus on just one thing here in this video. The cornerstone of democracy is our voting system, and the heart of the matter comes down to how we fill out our ballots and how we vote. Imagine if everyone could just vote their conscience without worrying about what everyone else was going to do. What if we knew that our votes would make a difference, even if our favorite couldn't win? What if our voting system was fair and impartial and didn't give anyone an unfair advantage? Our current voting system, plurality voting, fails at all these measures, and in fact, it's one of the worst, least accurate, and least representative voting systems out there. It's basic bad design, and we can do better. A major fatal flaw with our current voting system is wasted votes. Voter turnout is abysmally low, and when you go out and talk to people who say they didn't vote, you get an earful. The system is rigged. We already know who's going to win. Oregon always votes blue anyways. I can't stomach voting for the lesser of two evils. The candidates are two sides of the same coin. Many people respond that voting is our civic duty, which is true, but there's also a lot of truth to these statements. So let's go over a few of the ways that plurality voting can waste your vote. Number 1. Partisan primaries, especially closed primaries like we have in Oregon, exclude tons of voters who don't consistently identify with either major party. Nationally, that's almost half of voters, and here in Oregon, it's around a third. Independent or nonpartisan voters are the largest voting bloc, but if their candidates don't run as Democrats or Republicans, they don't have a chance because voters know that it's not safe to vote their conscience. Number 2. If your district always votes the same way. If you live in a safe district where one party always wins, then the election is consistently decided in the primary. This further excludes swing voters, but it doesn't stop there. If you're confident that your favorite is definitely going to lose, then there isn't much point in voting. Number 3. A divided electorate is the worst in terms of wasted votes. Every time a voter casts a vote for someone who isn't one of the two frontrunners, they risk having that vote backfire, which can actually help elect their worst-case scenario. This phenomena leads to all kinds of strategic voting, bullying those that won't fall in line, and even non-representative outcomes, where the candidate who was the clear favorite loses. The whole point of an election is to find out which candidate has the most support, but sometimes an election fails to do that. Many voting systems have an Achilles heel, and for our system, the fatal flaw comes into play anytime there are 3 or more candidates in a race. The more candidates, the more likely we are to elect the wrong winner. The problem is that any voter who likes more than one candidate is at a huge disadvantage because they can only vote for one or the other. Unless voters in each camp come to a consensus on where to put their muscle, they can end up divided and conquered. Voters learn the hard way that it's not safe to vote their conscience and that they have to vote for the lesser of two evils. In election jargon, this is called the spoiler effect. This divide and conquer scenario happened recently in the 2016 Republican primary. The primary had a lot of viable candidates, and at the beginning of the race it was hard to tell who the frontrunners were. This is an oversimplification, but on one side there were a lot of party line Republicans like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, and John Kasich. They had their differences, but many of their supporters overlapped and would have preferred any of them. On the other side was the outsider candidate, Donald Trump. Party line Republicans were a much bigger group than the Trump supporters, but since they didn't unite against him, their support was splintered. Trump probably would have lost to any one of them in a one-on-one election, but with them all divided, he was able to win even though he was only preferred by around a third of Republicans at the start of the primary. As the primary progressed and it became clear who the frontrunners were, voters got more and more strategic. Instead of voting for their favorite, people voted for the frontrunner that they preferred, but it was too late and the vote was already split. For democracy to work, we need a voting system that lets everyone vote their conscience and that elects the candidate with the most support, even in elections with lots of candidates. Outsiders like Trump, Bernie, Stein, and Johnson deserve a fair shot, but if they don't run major party, they don't stand a chance. If they do choose to run major party like Trump and Bernie did, they have to either walk the party line or else anger the party insiders. This sets candidates up to run a dishonest campaign, or at best, waters down the message of the major party platforms. Dishonest candidates give all politicians a bad name, so wouldn't we be better off if candidates weren't pressured into walking a party line that they don't agree with? Even if the major parties do manage to get their own members in line, a third-party candidate with a minority of supporters can be enough to throw the election. It doesn't matter how many people didn't bother to vote or how the major candidate didn't reach out and expand their base. The third-party candidate makes an easy scapegoat. We don't have to look back far to see this in action. In 2000, Green Party candidate Ralph Nader was blamed for costing Democrats the presidency. And in 1992, the independent Ross Perot was blamed for costing Republicans the presidency. Voting system reform isn't a third-party issue. This is a nonpartisan issue that everyone should unite behind. A voting system should let everyone vote their conscience. A voting system should actually elect the candidate with the most support. A voting system should work with any number of political parties or candidates. Plurality voting fails miserably by every measure, and we can do better. To find out what our options are, click the link below in the comments and check out the next video in this series.